The Italian Grand Prix is never short of emotion and drama, and the 2024 edition certainly didn't disappoint. After a 1-2 lockout in qualifying, McLaren spent the whole Grand Prix fighting, well, with each other, only for Charles Leclerc to one-stop his way to home glory and his second victory of 2024. Well, before we get into the analysis of the race itself, here's confirmation of the result. And as I say, it was Charles Leclerc that took the victory. He finished just 2.5 seconds ahead of Oscar Piastri in second and Lando Norris in third. Carlos Sainz bringing home that second Ferrari in fourth. Lewis Hamilton in fifth in the Mercedes before Max Verstappen coming home in sixth in the first of the Red Bulls. George Russell finished seventh, Perez in eighth, Alex Albon in ninth, a great result for Williams, and Kevin Magnussen getting points, many coming home in 10th. Then it was Alonso, Colapinto making his debut finishing 12th, Danny Ricciardo, Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, Hulkenberg, Guan Yu, Stroll and Tsunoda with a DNF. Well, joining me to make sense of a wild Italian Grand Prix, I'm delighted to have Jake Boxall-Legge, aka JBL, and Filip Cleeren, who doesn't really have an aka, but welcome to you all, gents. First of all, JBL, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Just looking forward to getting through the rest because it was very, very exciting, and then it turns on its head. So looking forward to dissecting it with you guys a bit later.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Bryn. As JBL said, a lot to unpack, and it's always nice when there's a lot of talking points, a lot of things that happened. I mean, if we look back to 2023, a lot of podcasts where we had to really dig deep to find topics, so now there's no problem with that.
Certainly isn't. Now, we're going to start, JBL, with Charles Leclerc and his shocking, in a good way, victory there over the two McLarens and all the other drivers, of course, naturally. But how did he make that one-stop work?
So I think there was a lot of factors behind how Leclerc managed to get that victory. And I think, first of all, Ferrari sensing that the best it could get was third and fourth. It being in a position where it could kind of go, okay, look, let's take a gamble here. I think it left itself quite open to one or a two stop, depending on how the race went. But secondly, I think, and this was brought up a little bit after the race, Leclerc came in for his stop to cover off Lando Norris, which didn't end up happening, but they reacted directly to Norris coming in early. McLaren effectively locking in a two-stopper at that point. Yeah, he came in a lap later, but Ferrari wanted to keep its options open, so he brought the tyres in very, very, very slowly, and that seemed to really help because what we discovered, I think partly this new track surface, a little bit of temperatures, that sort of thing, graining was really, really prevalent, particularly on the hard tyre. And so that was something that teams had to kind of work through and combat. And by bringing the tyres in very, very slowly, they kind of got through that phase and so didn't suffer from it. You saw Red Bull, for example, by lap 15, it was graining. Ferrari managed to do effectively 2 times that on the hard tyre. So, just a really fantastic result from him. And I think, Ferrari actually did a good strategy, which will be a surprise to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, well, they most certainly did. Now, Phil, with Ferrari performing the way they did in Italy, is this the start maybe of a comeback when it comes down to the Constructors' Championship and a push for it? They are only 39 points behind Red Bull.
Yeah, I'm finding it increasingly harder to predict because the gaps are so small between the teams, and then that means they're taking a lot of points off each other. I think we've not seen Red Bull performed this poorly since Singapore last year. Yeah, it's hard to say. The main thing with Ferrari is their biggest weakness is the high-speed cornering and the bouncing that it generates on their floor. They did bring a new floor to try and mitigate that, but in Monza, that's just not really a thing. And then we're going to Baku and Singapore, and there are no high-speed corners there. So I don't think we've really seen a true test of whether or not Ferrari has solved their issues, and we won't see until we go to the sort of North American races with Austin and Mexico. So I wasn't particularly surprised by Ferrari being quick here. They were quick here last year over one lap, and then, as we know, they had their issues keeping the tyres alive in the race. But yeah, they were always going to be quick here, I think, and they probably will be very competitive in Baku and in Singapore as well. Remember, Singapore, they won last year. So yeah, they will probably make some inroads on Red Bull over the next couple of races, but we haven't had a true test of whether they've solved their issues or not.
Yeah, I guess one race, one decent result in the last few is not the signs, but the fact they're only 39 points behind Red Bull certainly Must be making Red Bull nervous. They might even slip from second to third. They currently lead the Constructors, as we know, but it's not by many points. Now, JBL, I want to put it to you, this devil's advocate question here. Was this a victory for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, or was it a loss of victory for either driver at McLaren?
I don't think you can say that McLaren necessarily lost it per se. They were going with what their tyre life was telling them, and that was very much sort of firmly in the two-stop camp, and that's what they had to do. Perhaps you could make the case that they could have taken that medium stint a little bit longer and then, gone to the end on the hards. But I think ultimately they kind of felt that wasn't necessarily the quicker strategy. And either way, as it was, Ferrari effectively followed them in this a lap later with Leclerc. So their stint lengths were the same. McLaren was just suffering from more graining. And I think perhaps gearing towards that two-stopper anyway. I don't necessarily think that they expected Leclerc to do the same, given that he stopped a lap later. Perhaps Sainz was always going to be that wild card, but as you saw, his pace tailed off towards the end, and so both McLarens were easily able to overtake him. So I think you can probably count this as a sort of Ferrari gained, really. They saw what their minimum result would be. Thought, okay, well, this is what we get if we pit now, and if we pit a little bit later, the gap to Hamilton's so large that it's not going to be too much of a problem. So let's stay out, let's give it a go, and even if it fails, we'll still be P3, P4. So for them, it was just a sort of win-win situation, really. They'd locked down a certain result. They could afford to take that gamble. McLaren kind of couldn't, because their tyre life was not good in comparison, just really, really struggling to get through that graining phase. Perhaps they could have done if they continued on that stint, but when Piastri was asked, do you want to go on to a one-stop, can you do it? He said no, and you've kind of got to go with the driver feeling there. So, I think this is a Ferrari win for sure.
Fingernails bitten down to a nub there over in Italy on the last few laps. It would only take him one or two more, and you think maybe Piastri would have caught Charles Leclerc. So it was a bold move. Another bold move that we witnessed, Phil, was when Oscar Piastri took Lando Norris very early on, opening a couple of corners, and then really controlled the race. Is it a bit too late now, do you think, for McLaren to implement further Papaya rules when it comes down to their driver management?
Yeah, I think Papaya rules were sort of the hot topic of the weekend, wasn't it? Like, what are they? And then what is written in them, what isn't written in them, and what is implied. So Andrea Stella explained that, if you race your teammate, just take a bit more care than you would if it was another car, and don't crash into each other. Now, obviously, Piastri and Norris didn't crash into each other, but I wouldn't have said that Piastri was taking extra care with Norris, because it was a very bold pass. It was a great pass, but very bold. Norris didn't see it coming, and he had to sort of duck out of the way to not hit Piastri's left rear corner. So I'm not sure that's what they had in mind when they said give each other more space. So they've already said afterwards that they will probably have to tidy up the rules a bit. Whether it's too late or not, I don't think it's too late if you look at Red Bull's form. But it's always a delicate topic, because if we go back to Hungary, people were saying there, Norris sort of accidentally almost got ahead of Piastri in a pit stop sequence, and then he was asked to give Piastri the position back. And even, that was quite controversial, because obviously that was an opportunity to help Norris. But that was before the summer break. That was very early in the season. And that would be very harsh on Piastri, because remember, it was his maiden victory. It's a different story if Piastri had already won 10 or 12 races in his career, but that was his first. And to rob him of that before the summer break would be very harsh. Don't forget who Piastri's manager is, Mark Webber. He's had some experience with having to give up his position and being a number 2 driver at Red Bull. We all remember Multi-21. And it would have been really harsh. And I think if the McLaren had done it then it would have possibly caused a rift within the team, which has been catastrophic on the long term. Whereas now, I think the situation has changed quite a bit. Norris has won, obviously, in Zandvoort. Piastri is 4th off the podium. Piastri has been having a really rough time against Norris, especially in qualifying. I think the standings are now 15-4 for Norris, if you include the sprints. So it's clear who the most competitive driver is there now. And after Norris' win, he's definitely in the best position. So I think now, they probably should have allowed Norris to take second at least. But I think they will think twice about letting their drivers race that aggressively at the start of the race. They've already hinted that after the race, Andrea Silla said, we might have to do things differently. Zach Brown as well said, I think that the Papaya rules need tidying up. So they're kind of hinting at the fact that they're going to be supporting Norris from now on. And I think, they've been more than fair with Piastri so far, and they just have to do it now.
Yeah, I think one thing is for sure, and that is Papaya rules is now going to enter the lexicon of F1 phrases, multi-21, that kind of thing. So that will certainly enter the dictionary of one-use terms. But I think the time is right now to go, okay, Oscar's had a fair crack at it now. He's got some good results there, but ultimately he's not in the challenge for the championship. And it is basically a binary choice now. Do you want to win a championship, or do you want to sort of do everything you can to keep team harmony? Because you're not going to win that title with Norris. I think, the Constructors' Championship's looking pretty all right if Red Bull continues on its sort of current trajectory, if you like. But ultimately, it's going to require a little bit more than just Lando getting some results and hoping that it's enough. Oscar's going to be ahead in some races. That's going to be the situation because they're very, very closely matched now. So ultimately, they're going to have to sacrifice him at some point. It's not something they're going to want to do. I think they would rather win this championship with fairness and with what one would consider as kind of, treating their teammates fairly, that kind of integrity, that sort of thing. But you can't necessarily do that. The situations aren't going to be thus, that it's going to be a really nice situation for them. They're going to have to make these tough decisions. That's going to be the difference between winning the championship and not. I don't mind that there weren't particular team orders at Monza. I don't mind Piastri's. In fact, I thought Piastri's overtake was fantastic. You can't win a championship by continuing to do that. You're going to have to rely on Oscar to be the wingman, if you like, the rear gunner. That's the bottom line here. So if McLaren wants to win the title, I know it's a difficult decision they have to make, but they've got to do it.
Yeah, and Oscar's obviously a lot younger, well, a fair bit younger, not a lot younger, than Lando Norris. He's relatively new in Formula One compared to Lando Norris. But it all comes down to Lando Norris's starts, doesn't it, Phil? We've mentioned this before in these podcasts and videos that Lando Norris doesn't lead off the start when he's in pole position. And that is a problem for him. And that is something that the team need to look at. Why is it that he's struggling off the line? Is it becoming a bit of an issue for him? And what can Piastri do in these remaining 8 races to assist him there? Because that's going to be the catalyst for the championship.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of pinpoint the exact reason, but if you look at Zandvoort, obviously Norris and Piastri both had poor starts. They pretty much had an identical start. So it seems like that was more of a procedural thing that McLaren could have done better rather than something that Norris did wrong. And I think in Monza's start wasn't bad. It was just, he obviously had to cover off Piastri by going to the inside for the first chicane, which meant he was offline for the chicane. That he had a massive twitch on the exit, so he had to compromise his run, his acceleration towards Curva Grande and then the second chicane. And that sort of allowed Piastri to have a good run on him. Again, Norris went offline to defend, so it wasn't necessarily the starts, but just the fact that he had to defend his position so hard against Piastri that he compromised both chicanes, basically.
Well, there you go. We'll have to leave it just about there. Next time, we'll have a look at Red Bull. Are both their championships in jeopardy now? Well, make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with all the content. But as usual, thanks for watching.